Hey guys, what's going on? James here, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about all of the undrafted free agents the Tampa Bay Buccaneers signed right after the 2019 NFL Draft, so I hope you guys all enjoyed. But before we get into that, I want to ask you guys a question. Would you guys be interested in a MrBucsNation podcast? Just a quick question to throw out there. It's been something I've been tossing around in my head the past couple of years, so let me know what you think about it down in the comments section below. First guy I want to talk about is Nick Fitzgerald, quarterback out of Mississippi State. 4.64 40-yard dash for a quarterback. Now that's really impressive, and it kind of goes with the theme of what Nick Fitzgerald is basically. He's an athlete, and he's been labeled as an athlete as such whenever he was signed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Everybody knows that this guy is just an insane athlete, and I know a lot of people have been comparing him to current Saints quarterback and athlete and whatnot, Taysom Hill. Now, I like this comparison. I know it's probably been beaten to death, but it does make a lot of sense. Taysom Hill, 6'5", 200-some pounds, and this guy's that athletic. That's a very big deal, especially whenever you consider he's got some legitimate passing ability. He does need to work on his deep ball, but we'll forget about that for right now. But, you know, the Buccaneers could use him in some very unique ways, much like how the Saints have been using Taysom Hill. I know that the Eagles have used guys like Nick Foles in the past in a very unique way. Obviously, the Philly special. The New England Patriots have used Tom Brady in a receiving role just for the lulz, and then even the Cleveland Browns used Baker Mayfield in a receiving role as well. So it's kind of interesting how these teams are using quarterbacks in more different types of ways, and I feel the Buccaneers could do a very similar thing with Nick Fitzgerald. Maybe you have him receive a little bit, maybe you have him run the ball a little bit, he can block punts, he can do a lot of stuff. So I think if you work on him a little bit on each and every aspect of the game pretty much, you can have a very special player there. Now obviously it's going to be hard pulling him in that many different directions, but you know, don't do anything crazy. You know, you have him be on special teams, you have him be on offense, you know, you probably don't want to put him on defense, but again, he should be a very productive player should he make the Buccaneers roster. What's going to be interesting is, you know, does he beat out a guy like Ryan Griffin for a roster spot, or maybe he beats out a running back, or maybe he beats out a wide receiver. I mean, he is an athlete after all. You can use him in a lot of different types of ways, so it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with Nick Fitzgerald. He's one to keep an eye on. Next, you have running back Bruce Anderson out of North Dakota State, and this guy has got like some legitimate potential as like a running back, at least in terms of his overall build. I believe he's 5'11", 210 pounds, you know, and he does need to work on certain aspects of his game, specifically stuff like ball carrier vision and stuff like that, but he certainly has the prototypical build of what you expect like a star running back to look like. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in all these training camps and whatnot. I'm very interested because the back end of the Buccaneers running back position is kind of open right now. Obviously, Dare Ogunbowale, Sean Wilson, and Andre Ellington have all garnered some type of praise from Bruce Arians, but Bruce Anderson, you know, he could come in and surprise some people. You don't know. You know, we've definitely seen it before in the past. Sean Wilson, Dare Ogunbowale, those guys were surprises last year, so maybe we see a similar situation this year. I think that Bruce Anderson is going to need to carve out a role for himself on special teams first before doing anything else. So I guess the big question is can he be a sure tackler on special teams, and can he offer something as a returner? So that's something we're going to have to keep an eye on when talking about Bruce Anderson, running back out of North Dakota State. The third guy I want to talk about is wide receiver DeMarcus Lodge out of Ole Miss, and everybody loves this guy, okay? 4.55 40-yard dash, and again, I know a lot of you guys love DeMarcus Lodge. Shout out to you, Ethan. But again, this guy's a pretty good wide receiver, all things considered. He was actually supposed to be drafted in day 3 of the 2019 NFL Draft, according to most analysts. He was not drafted, and the Buccaneers got him for free. That's a good deal. You know, you gotta love that type of deal. But again, really good wide receiver, just solid overall, you know, very good. This wide receiver class in the 2019 draft was pretty deep, so I like to think that adding a guy like DeMarcus Lodge, it's basically like having another draft pick, essentially, a 6th, 7th, maybe even a 5th round draft pick. So I have a lot of high hopes for a guy like DeMarcus Lodge. Going to be very interesting in terms of the back end of that wide receiver depth chart as well, much like with the running back position, because you have guys like Sergio Bailey, who I know that a lot of people were excited about last year, and I'm still very excited about him. I think that he can carve a good role for himself, and he was about to do that before he got injured. You also have Bobo Wilson, you have Brashad Perriman, you have Justin Watson who's there, you have Scott Miller who's still there. You have all these wide receivers who, you know, potentially deserve a roster spot on this team. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with DeMarcus Lodge. Maybe he pushes out a former draft pick, you know, maybe like a Scott Miller, maybe like a Bobo Wilson. I know he wasn't drafted, but he was essentially, you know, he's been on the team long enough, but, you know, maybe he pushes one of those guys out and takes a roster spot. I'm going to be very intrigued to see how DeMarcus Lodge does in training camp and preseason and whatnot. He's one of the top guys to keep an eye on. Next, you have wide receiver Malik Taylor. Again, another pretty good wide receiver, solid size, 4.61. I believe he ran a 4.52 40-yard dash, so again, very good speed as well. He's just another very solid wide receiver. Can't say enough good things about him. Again, going to be very interesting to see what happens with him in the wide receiver depth chart. He could be a practice squad player, but he could also surprise some people as well. I'm a very big fan of Malik Taylor. I think that he has some pretty good ability and some very good hands as well, so he's just going to have to be somebody who we just have to wait and see as well. Again, you never know. I really hope that he, you know, really shines in training camp and preseason and whatnot as well. Next, you have wide receiver Conrad Simpson, and this guy's kind of a lot like Scott Miller in a way. Okay, very similar size, 5'9". I believe this guy, Conrad Simpson, is 187 pounds, something like that, and he ran a 4.57 40-yard dash. I think so. I think I got all that right. But anyway, you know, Conrad Simpson, he could be a guy in the slot. He could be a deep threat. He could be a lot of things. I kind of compare him to Scott Miller a little bit because of just their similar size and their similar competitive toughness and their attitude and whatnot. So Conrad Simpson, you know, he could get on as a very solid slot wide receiver. He could be a returner. You know, he could definitely be a returner. He's small, he's shifty kind of guy, very good agility and acceleration and whatnot. I think that he could have a unique opportunity on special teams specifically for the Buccaneers because he still has some pretty decent speed. I know 4.57, a lot of people balk at that and say, oh, that's not that fast. That's pretty fast. So I think that, you know, he could have certain abilities as a returner. He could have certain abilities as a rotational type of slot guy, or even just a rotational type of deep threat guy. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens for him. But again, I like him a whole heck of a lot. Next, you have personally my top guy, okay? The 6'2", 209-pound wide receiver out of Buffalo, Anthony Johnson. Anthony Johnson's my top guy, okay? Mainly not just because of his really big build against 6'2", 209 pounds. He's pretty darn good, but I also like the fact that most analysts had him going in at least the 4th round of the NFL draft. Now, obviously, he wasn't going to get drafted through rounds through 3, but a lot of people were saying that, you know, Anthony Johnson out of Buffalo was going to get drafted in probably the 4th round. That didn't happen. He went undrafted, so I think that this is a huge steal for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I know, you know, again, this is a very, very deep wide receiver depth chart now with a lot of the guys I just mentioned, as well as a lot of the guys who are currently on the team. But I think that Anthony Johnson has some, like, legit chance to make this roster. I'm very, very excited for Anthony Johnson. I think he's going to do a lot of good. He has a lot of similar talents to Mike Evans. He's very good at drawing pass interference penalties. Very big guy, just toss it up and he'll catch it type of guy. You know, I'm very, very excited for Anthony Johnson. My top guy in terms of this entire list of undrafted free agents, there is a couple other guys that we'll talk about in a little bit that I do like a lot as well, but Anthony Johnson, 4th round value as an undrafted free agent, that's like cash money, okay? You cannot beat that type of value. I think that he's going to make the roster. I think he's going to make some noise, and I think that he's just going to be a good wide receiver for the Buccaneers. So get hyped about Anthony Johnson, get hyped about all these guys because, you know, I think that they have some legit potential here. Now, we got to get this going a little bit quicker, otherwise we're going to be here for the end of days. But anyway, just a couple more guys I want to talk about real quick. Isaiah Seeright, tight end out of Fordham, Nathan Trejo, center out of Wisconsin Whitewater, and then guard Zack Bailey out of South Carolina. All of these guys have some pretty good athleticism, and I specifically like a guy like Zack Bailey. He's very versatile. Versatility is a big part of his game, and I think that all 3 of these guys, both Zack Bailey, Nathan Trejo, and Isaiah Seeright, all have an opportunity to have backup roles because, again, pretty wide open at the back end of not just the offensive line, but also the tight end position as well. You have guys like Anthony Alclair kind of as that 3rd tight end, so maybe Isaiah Seeright battles him for that type of spot. And then Zack Bailey, Nathan Trejo, those guys, you know, do have a legitimate chance to make this roster because backup center is definitely a question mark. Backup guard is definitely a question mark. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens. I'd probably expect one of those 3 guys to make the roster, honestly. And if I had to bet money, I'd probably say Zack Bailey. Next, you have defensive end Kazin Daniels out of Charleston. Now, this is really interesting. A lot of you guys actually wanted me to do a very focused piece on this guy, and I actually might, because he's actually not even partially, he's completely blind in one eye. He had a very gruesome accident, like very, very bad accident that blinded him in one eye. I believe he fell on the top of a chain link fence eye first. That's insane, okay? That is insane, and that makes me cringe, because that sounds like an awful injury. It completely blinded him in one eye, but despite his injury, he is still a very, very good pass rusher as a defensive end, and he's very versatile as well. He can play outside linebacker, defensive end, wherever you need to put him. He'll do good. He's very quick, very twitchy, very good pass rushing ability, especially considering, you know, he's freaking blind in one eye. That's kind of a big deal. So I understand why you guys wanted me to do a kind of more focused video on a guy like Kazin Daniels, because the guy has a phenomenal story. He's facing a lot of odds here, and I think that he has a very decent chance to be a rotational type of guy for the Buccaneers, because the guy's a good pass rusher. Lucas Dennis, safety out of Boston College, is next, a 4.64 40-yard dash. And I know that doesn't impress a whole lot of people, but to me, that kind of screams maybe this guy can play a little bit of linebacker, because he's fast, he has good catching ability because he is a former wide receiver, and he's fast, hard-hitting, you know, very strong, very mental competitiveness type of attitude to him. So, you know, 4.64 40-yard dash, a lot of people are going to say that's slow. To me, that kind of screams, again, maybe this guy can be a rotational type of linebacker, maybe he can be a rotational type of money backer role, much like what Dejon Buchanan is doing right now. I'm very interested to see what happens with Lucas Dennis, because I know the safety position is absolutely loaded with former draft picks right now, because you have Jordan Whitehead, former 4th round draft pick, you have Justin Evans, former 2nd round draft pick, you have MJ Stewart, former 2nd round draft pick, and you have Mike Edwards, former 3rd round draft pick. So pretty loaded up right now in terms of the safety position. So maybe Lucas Dennis ends up on the practice squad, maybe he does end up making the roster, maybe they do end up moving him to linebacker or something like that, but I'm going to be very interested to see what happens with him, because he's a very hard-hitting type of guy, and I think that he could thrive in terms of having a money backer type of role on this defense. Final two guys I want to talk about is offensive lineman out of Toledo, Brock Ruble, 6'8", 320-pound build. Let me say that again for everybody in the back. 6'8", 320-pound build. That's huge, and a lot of people are projecting him to be a very serviceable right tackle should he have the right type of development and coaching and whatnot. Potential successor to DeMar Dodson? Maybe, we'll see. I think he also has to compete with a guy like, not DeMar Dodson, Caleb Benenoch for that backup right tackle spot. But again, the way with how Caleb Benenoch has done some things, I mean, Brock Ruble does have a pretty decent chance to make this roster. He just has a cool name, Brock Ruble, you know. But again, you know, very big size, you know, he's basically as big as DeMar Dodson right now anyway. So I think that he does have a pretty decent chance to make this roster as a backup, or at least end up on a role as a special teams type guy. But again, really, really excited for the size that Brock Ruble brings to the Buccaneers, and I think that he could be that guy who eventually succeeds DeMar Dodson. Finally, we have the best player, okay, the absolute best, long snapper Dan Godsill out of Indiana. Long snapper Dan Godsill out of Indiana. Let's go. Obviously, it's a long snapper. He's probably going to make the roster, considering how the Buccaneers need a long snapper, so he's probably going to make the roster. So shout out to you, Dan Godsill from Indiana. Let's freaking go, boys. Got a long snapper in the mix. It's going to be great. But that's pretty much it for all of the undrafted free agents that the Buccaneers signed to contracts, but there were a couple of guys who got tryouts for the Buccaneers rookie minicamp, and I want to talk about two guys in particular. The first guy is punter from UCF, Mac Loudermilk. Mac Loudermilk is his name. That's phenomenal. I freaking love this guy, okay? Mac Loudermilk, and he's actually a pretty decent punter, all things considered. Don't let the name fool you just for the memes, okay? This guy's actually a really, really good punter. Obviously, he might not make the Buccaneers roster, considering Bradley Pinion signed a 4-year contract worth $3 million, but I think that Mac Loudermilk could end up on an NFL team and having a productive role as a punter, because he's just a good punter, you know? Bring him in for a tryout. You know, it's basically not even for the Buccaneers at this point. It's kind of just to show, like, hey, Mac, you know, let's see what you can do as a punter, and, you know, we might send your way to a different NFL team, you know? I think that Mac Loudermilk will end up on an NFL team, and I'm very excited to see him in the NFL. Finally, you have quarterback Vincent Testaverde Jr. from Albany, the son of former Buccaneers quarterback Vinny Testaverde, and I really want to see this guy succeed, okay? I think that Vincent Testaverde Jr. can be a very good quarterback for the Buccaneers, because he's been with his dad his entire life. His dad's a former NFL quarterback, former #1 overall pick by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I think it's just a cool story that, you know, the Buccaneers are bringing in Vincent Testaverde Jr. for a tryout. You know, his dad's former team. Obviously, Vinny Testaverde would go on to be a part of many other NFL teams, but again, very cool story. You know, come back to where Vinny Testaverde first started. So very cool story in my opinion. I don't know if he's going to make the roster because there's a lot of competition at the quarterback room right now, but maybe he makes it as a practice squad player. Maybe he goes on to be a backup for another NFL team. I want to see Vincent Testaverde Jr. succeed in the NFL, darn it, and I really think he has a good chance from all the training that his dad's been giving him. Okay. We're finally done. So guys, let me know what you think about all of the undrafted free agents down in the comments section below. Which ones are you excited about? Which ones are you not excited about? I'm excited about all of these guys because, again, you never know who's going to make an impact on your team until they make an impact. Nobody thought Adam Humphries or Cameron Brate or Peyton Barber or all of the undrafted free agents the Buccaneers have used the past few years were going to have a very good career until they made an impact. Michael Bennett is another great example for the Buccaneers. You know, these guys can have an impact. You just have to give them time and just wait to see how things shake out. So again, you know, I cannot stress that enough. That's kind of like the theme of this channel now, is you don't know who your impact players are until they make an impact. So never count, oh god, never count anybody out, okay? Seriously, never count anybody out. Everybody has a chance to go out there and do something great. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Hope y'all enjoyed, but until the next video, I will see you in the next one. But until then, and as always, guys, goodbye for now, and go Bucs.